identified is that there's no existing gas infrastructure available to service these particular areas, and for that reason, they've chosen the modality or the method of isocontainers that are easily transportable to these areas. Chairperson, the applicant has identified a number of areas in this, a number of customers rather in these areas, and we've provided a list of those customers on page 5 of the submission. Now, in terms of the source of gas, as I said, they'll be importing it from the Netherlands. It will be delivered to the Port of Durban, and their central point is going to be at an area in Pinetown, from where the ISO containers will then sort of be distributed to the various areas that I've mentioned across the country. I think it's important just to mention that as a backup, the applicant has also identified an alternative source of gas in Mozambique, just in case the supply from the Netherlands gives them problems. And in terms of the ISO containers that they'll be using, there will be type A and type B, and those are shown again on page 5 of the submission. We've assessed the application, Chairperson, for compliance with the requirements of the Act, including the Gas Act, as well as the rules and the regulations, and we found it to be compliant with all those requirements. There was a debriefing held where members raised specific issues on the application, and those are extensively covered on the submission, together with management responses to the issues that were raised by members. Chairperson, I think on that score, then we'd like to recommend the approval of the application and the recommendations on page 13. We're recommending approval of the application together with the reasons for decision, as well as the license conditions. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Numalo. I think our members I would like to request that the submission is taken as read, and your other team members, they may come in relation to questions that members may raise. And on that note, I would like to open up the submission for discussion, members, in terms of issues of clarity, points of enhancements in relation to this particular application for a trading license in about, I think, 5 provinces in our country. Members, by show of hands, you may come in. Mr. Kumede, you may come in, sir.
Good morning, Chairperson, members, and colleagues. Start by saying that I support the recommendations. I just have a question based on paragraph 7 on the overstamped page 4 of 8/65. I just wanted to find out the issue there over the requirement for infrastructure. Is this the requirement of the Gas Act? Perhaps if I can be assisted there, point to the section of the Act that raises that requirement for trading. And I guess the question I'm asking, does this mean that one needs to own infrastructure first to be able to trade? Thanks.
You're muted, Mr. Gumede, or Mr. Gumede?
No, I'm done, Chairperson.
Okay. Oh, yes. I think the team heard you. I don't see any other hand from members. I think for me, in terms of issues of clarity, I've got an issue in relation to the triple BEE partner, and I've noted that the application is an application that was made in 2020, and the applicant to date still indicates that there is no, they have not found a partner. And I think in paragraph 35, the team has indicated that they will address this particular issue. I don't know whether I think it's paragraph 35, or rather, let me just say, without mixing up the paragraphs for the team, they have given a response that this particular issue they'll ensure that it's covered in terms of the license conditions. And I have noted the draft license that has been attached to the submission. And looking at it, I couldn't really pick up the exact provision in that draft that talks to this particular issue, except to see the one that is on paragraph 9 of 41. And I wasn't too sure if this is what is intended to, or rather that paragraph, my assumption is that it's normally a standardized paragraph in our license condition. And I don't know whether from the team side, that paragraph is also intended to cover up this particular requirement. And what was also of interest to me is to check whether is there a timeline that would want to give the licensee in terms of compliance with this particular requirement on the triple BEE in terms of its application. I think, yeah, that was just my question that seeks clarity from the team. Thank you. I still don't see any hand, Mr. Ngumalo, and maybe you and your team may come in and respond to the points that have been raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just quickly on Mr. Gumete's question, on whether an applicant needs to be the owner of the infrastructure to be able to be licensed. There is no provision in the Gas Act, Mr. Gumete, that specifies that the licensee needs to be the owner of the infrastructure, although we've said in the past that it's actually easier when the applicant is the actual owner of the infrastructure, because then they would be closer and privy to certain details regarding the type of facilities that are going to be used. So it tends to be easier that way. But there is no specific provision in the Gas Act that really requires the applicant to be the owner of the infrastructure. I think you might have noticed that in the current application, the applicant has actually indicated that they will be renting the facilities, in other words, the ISO containers, as opposed to owning them. And I think members might recall that this was the same kind of approach that we saw also with regard to other applications, including, perhaps I can't mention them, but there has been other applicants that have taken that approach of renting the infrastructure instead of owning them. With regard to Ms. Sitole's question on the triple BEE issue, yes, I think what the applicant has indicated, Ms. Sitole, is that they're actually waiting for the applicant to be licensed before they can actually commit to taking up that 20% of the BEE interest that has been set aside. So hopefully once the application is approved, then they will be stepping forward to actually take up that interest. And I think with regard to the timelines, we've not indicated that, but I think we can just put it in the license condition to basically align it with that undertaking from the applicant, who said that the BEE shareholders will actually commit once the application has been approved. Thank you, Chairperson. I think I'll leave it there. I think Ms. Maseti has got a hand up. Perhaps she wants to add. All right, thank you.
Yes, just a follow-up on that, because in our documents, we're saying that condition on compliance with triple BEE will be in the license condition. And hence, my point to seek clarity on whether paragraph 9, does it attempts to address that or not? And I think the other thing that is not as well clear in terms of your response is whether the draft license condition, if it doesn't cover it, does it mean we will have to amend it? I don't know. If we add this triple BEE condition, if it's not covered by that paragraph 9, are we not going to bring it back to this committee to reconsider the amendment of that license? I think that's where I was just getting a bit confused in terms of what you're committing to say that we will regulate this particular requirement through a license condition. And it's not clear where it is. And if it is covered by 9, will we bring it back once the only amend the license once they have complied with that particular requirement. But let me take Ms. Maseti's hand first, and then you may respond if there's a need to do so if Ms. Maseti is not going to cover that point. Thank you. Ms. Maseti.
Thanks, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'm coming in with regards to the question asked by Mr. Gumede. I don't think that it has been answered. The essence of the question was not about the owner. I think Mr. Gumede was trying to just explain there. His question is about whether the Act requires that if you want to enter into trading, do you require infrastructure? That is the essence of his question. So if we can answer that question in terms of the Act and in terms of the rules. His question is not about if you intend conducting trading, therefore you're supposed to be the owner of the infrastructure per se. But he's asking, whenever somebody applies for a license for a trading, does it mean that there must always be an infrastructure that is there, and or maybe that a possible trader must own? So we need to clarify that link between trading and the infrastructure in terms of the Act and in terms of the rules. That is the essence of his question. So it has not been answered. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Maseti. Mr. Ngumalo, you may, but you may be assisted by any of your team members if you so wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me start quickly by just clarifying that starting with the question from Mr. Gumede, as now clarified by Ms. Maseti, you do need infrastructure to trade. I think just to specify that and clarify that everyone that wants to trade does need infrastructure, and that is the very reason why this applicant has actually specifically identified the ISO containers as the facilities through which it will be conducting the trading. So the ownership or the possession of infrastructure is actually a requirement in terms of the Act for trading purposes, because if you don't have the infrastructure, then that means that you're not able to actually trade or to carry out the licensed activities. So the requirement is very clear there that you do need the infrastructure for the purpose of trading. Chair, just to get back to your question around the BEE license condition, I think the one that we've put online, I think is what the team had intended to actually cover that aspect. But given the type of commitment that has been made by the applicant as well as the BEE shareholders, I think we may need to just enhance that condition so that it can talk directly and more clearly to the type of commitment that is made, including the issue of the timeline that you referred to earlier on. So what we will do in as far as that license condition is concerned, we will enhance it and we can have it either circulated to members before we send it out, but it does require an enhancement just to be more clear and specific in terms of then to be in line with the commitment that has been made by both the applicant as well as the BEE shareholders. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Ngumalo. I don't see any other hand, members. May I then request that we move on to recommendations? Oh, I see Mr. Gumede's hand is up again. Mr. Gumede, you may come in.
Chairperson, I'd like to thank Madam Maseti first for trying to explain what I meant. I know this is maybe not a popular view, but the question I'm asking is a simple one. That says, if we don't have a particular reference in the Act, which is all I was asking for, link whatever things that the requirements we impose in terms of license evaluations, whatever, on applicants to particular sections of the Act. Because if we don't, we could easily be imposing barriers to entry, which are necessary. Because clearly, you could have a lot of traders who potentially, in respect of what trading is, which is basically a marketing exercise, who potentially could be trading on the back of other people's infrastructure. Now, if we put that as a requirement, as it is clearly indicated in that paragraph, all I'm asking is, can I be pointed out to that section of the Act that empowers us to do this, so that at least we're not seen as imposing unnecessary barriers to entry on potential market participants. But clearly, I do support the actual recommendation. The only thing I was asking is that, are we sure that this requirement that we're imposing, which is what we've done in other places, for instance, that may come back to bite us in the future, is that especially because there will most likely be people who will be developing infrastructure because that's their business. They may be on the infrastructure business. It could be a Transnet, it could be whatever. But it does not mean that those people have got interest in actually participating in the market. That is all I was asking, Chair.
Mr. Numara, maybe with your team, I'll recognize Ms. Masetti. Please just try and check the exact section in the Act. Ms. Masetti, you may come.
Good. Thanks, Chairperson. Chairperson, I think the team must just clarify this. It is not necessary. It is not correct to say a person who applies for a trading license needs infrastructure. That one is incorrect. And perhaps they must just also just rephrase that that paragraph that Mr. Kumeda referred to. Is not that the trader or the person who applies for a trading license needs infrastructure. It is not there. That is why even with the pricing, we state clearly that traders typically do not own infrastructure or network where they will have to be paid a tariff. Storage also is part of that, because for storage you pay a tariff. So that must be clarified, because it is not true. It is just that because you say you are going to embark on a trading activity, it is important, therefore, that you are indicating what will facilitate your trading. How will you make sure that indeed this trading activity you intend entering into will be possible? So that is why you need to say that I will be trading. I don't own infrastructure. I don't own any or network. However, my trading will then be facilitated by this other existing infrastructure. So because this is an LNG, they must just simplify it for members to state that, yes, this is the kind of infrastructure that will land in our ports, whatever ports that this will land, because they are now touching on all areas in different regions. Then they will then indicate how are they going to, if it's going to land in KZN, how are they going to bring it to Eastern Cape and to Cape Town? Because even the power ship has to have, they had to have FSRU, in the 3 ports. Now with this one, how possible is that? Because now you're asking for trading purposes. Then from there, when it gets transferred from the vessel now into this, how are they going to do that? That capability of doing it, how does it get transferred so that it gets transported by road in those specialized trucks that will be carrying ISO tankers? That's the kind of explanation that is needed as well, so that everybody can at least appreciate then how this trading activity will be facilitated. But there is nothing in the Act that says that a trader must own infrastructure or must own network. So they must come in and clarify that. I saw Mahlanu's hand earlier on, if then they could assist so that we don't spend much more time again on this issue. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Ms. Masetti. Mr. Numalo, can we allow Mr. Mahlanu to come in? And if you have anything, you can come after him.
Okay. Yeah. I think there is just something I wanted to explain in relation to that, Chairperson, but Mahlanu can come in and then I will explain it once it's done.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Nayo?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I think Ms. Masetti has spoken to the matter. Yes, we all agree that for trading, it's a separate activity to infrastructure. So therefore, you don't need infrastructure for you to trade. there are traders in the market that when they started, they did not own infrastructure and they use other bodies' infrastructure. But in this case, the applicant clearly articulated that they'll be trading LNG. And therefore, the question was, since there is no infrastructure for LNG in the country, how will you trade? Section 21(1)(a) of the Gas Act states that a licensee must carry out the construction, operation, or trading activities for which the license is granted. So that's where we derive this, that how are you going to trade for this particular type of gas we are bringing in the country? If you're trading on CNG or natural gas, then you can submit a contract from Sasol or from the CNG operators. So in this state, the applicant could not provide that. And therefore, because of that, they could not carry out the requirements in terms of Section 21(1) of the Gas Act. Hence, we require that they must have some form of infrastructure or some form of agreement with the infrastructure owner that they'll be able to trade over that infrastructure. So that's where it came in this matter that they need to have infrastructure linked into the trading license. I hope that I've cleared, Mr. Nimo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nayo. Mr. Numalo?
Thank you, Chairperson. Just to add on to what Mahlanu has said, I think just to clarify the point again, that the question really that is critical is one that says, what will the applicant be using for the trading purposes? In other words, if the applicant wants to supply gas to all these customers that it has specified in all these areas that we've referred to, what will the applicant be using? And therefore, the answer to that question really has to be the one that specifies that and says the applicant will be using these ISO containers. And I think we clarified earlier on that it doesn't mean that the applicant will need to own these ISO containers. It merely needs to actually have access to them for the purpose of the trading. And in this case, the applicant has clarified that it will be renting these ISO containers to trade over them. So that is the part that I just wanted to clarify, Chairperson. But the applicant, as stated in the application, will be using the ISO containers for the trading purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahlanu. Mr. Gumede, you answered?
Chairperson, Madam Assenti actually provided the answer I was looking for. Thanks.
Okay. On that note, members, I don't see any other hand. May I request that we then move on to the recommendations? The recommendations are on P13, paragraph 47. And in terms of the recommendations, I'll also read out the areas that are applied for in terms of the trading license. We are requested as a committee to approve the following. The application for LNG hub for a license to trade in gas in the following province. KwaZulu-Natal province, which will cover Richards Bay in Mhlathuze, eThekwini Metropolitan, Mkambati local municipality, Pietermaritzburg, Umsunduzi local municipality, Ndwende local municipality, KwaDukuza local municipality. The other province in Mpumalanga, they would want to supply or to trade in relation to with Delmas, Victor Kanye local municipality, Witbank, Malahleni local municipality, Emakazeni local municipality, Chief Albert Lutuli local municipality, Secunda, Governor Mbeki local municipality in the Eastern Cape, Kabeja, Nelson Mandela Metropolitan, and Sundays River Valley, which is in the Sundays River local municipality, Western Cape, Saldanha Bay local municipality, Cape Town City of Cape Town Metropolitan Municipality, Gauteng and Langlaagte area, which is within the city of Johannesburg Metropolitan. We are also requested to approve the attached decision and reasons for decision attached as Annexure A, the certificate and the draft a license condition, which are in Annexure 2, which will be enhanced. By show of hand, members, can I get an indication that you approve the application with the provided recommendations in paragraph 47? Thank you, Mr. Gumede. Thank you, Ms. Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. I also support Mr. Umalo, your submission has been approved. And I think that was the only item we had in our open session of our meeting. And I think we'll now then move to closure of this session in terms of section 8.9 of NERA, and then move on to our closed session of the meeting.